Hello, welcome to Secure Talk, your trusted source of information on the latest threats, trends, tools, and technology related to cybersecurity and compliance.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Secure Talk. My name is Mark Schreiner, and I'll be your host for this episode of Secure Talk. Today, we're going to be talking to Scott McCrady, who is the CEO of SolCyber Managed Security Services. Scott has worked in the industry for many years. He's been in leadership roles at IBM and EDS, where he held the security engineer and team leader positions, both in US and London. Previous to SolCyber, Scott built the Asia Pacific Japan business, APJ business, at Symantec. He ran the global managed security service and the Symantec and Accenture joint venture. That's some pretty interesting stuff that I want to talk about because I spent a lot of time out there myself. Scott also worked at FireEye pre-IPO and created their global managed security services. We're going to talk to Scott about managed security services and why companies want to outsource those services and when does it make sense. But before we do that, I want to say hi to Scott. Scott, how are you today?
Hey, Mark, I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Awesome. I'm up in the cold, dark, rainy Pacific Northwest. Whereabouts you located?
I'm in Dallas right now. So I spend most of my time here, grew up here, and then I left for about 15, 20 years. So yeah, I spent some time in London, Sydney, Singapore, DC. So recently moved back about a year and a half ago.
Yeah, I did notice that you have quite a bit of international experience. Specifically, the thing that stood out to me is your time in APJ. What was that like?
Well, first of all, it's fantastic. Asia just has an energy about it.
Mm-hmm.
I got my first exposure when I was in university. They ran a really interesting program where they would send kids overseas for a variety of things. And they had a thing in Bangkok where you'd go over and you teach kids English, sometimes as monks, sometimes as disadvantaged kids. And so I got to spend a year in Bangkok when I was between my junior and senior year in university.
Wow, what a great experience.
It was so good. I still speak Thai, so if you ever want to go to Thailand and know the good restaurants and the fun places to go, happy to give you some recommendations.
Sawasdee Cup.
Yeah, very well done. It's such a great place. But you know how when you do something like that, it gets in your blood a little bit. And I just loved Asia. I love the energy. It's booming. It was fast growing, and so I got the opportunity to go back with Symantec and build their APJ business, their managed security services there. Built a SOC in Sydney, one in Tokyo, and one in Chennai, India. And it was just a great experience. I've used this joke many times, but living in Sydney, Australia, running APJ is about as good a job as you're ever going to get. And so leaving to go run the global business was a little bit tough. It was a great opportunity, so I couldn't turn it down. But it was a really beautiful place to live, and it's just fast paced, right? So there's always something happening in Asia, so it was fantastic.
Yeah, I spent off and on about 20 years in Asia myself, and the last 5 years were in Japan, and loved it, and was there with my family. It's a great experience, and the energy level, like you said, especially in places like Singapore and Hong Kong, China. I mean, up until recently, obviously, the whole world's had problems, but it's just the rate of change, the pace of change and development, and the eagerness to adopt new technologies and new processes. It was super fun to be in that type of environment. So how is it for you to come back to the US and Dallas after all that international exposure?
Well, I mean, so SolCyber it's like anytime you have a startup and a founder and you're trying to build a company, it's just sort of all encompassing and all consuming. So it's a blast, and all my family's in Dallas, and my folks are here, brothers here. So that part's all great. I will say I totally miss the international travel. Whether or not it's work or otherwise, it's been a crazy 2 or 3 years, as we all know. But I definitely miss the food, the people. I've got a ton of friends in Asia still. And then SolCyber will end up over there when the time is right. So we'll be back. But
let me know. Let me know when you're starting to knock on Asia's door, and maybe we can collaborate a little bit.
Well, Mark, it's funny because there are very few Americans really that spend time internationally these days. We're one of the only countries that has global taxation, and so it's just a pain for Americans to do it. So you sort of have to really be committed to the cause. It's not like it's drudgery or it's a trial, but kudos to you, because I don't run into that many Americans that have spent significant time overseas. So
Well, thank you.
happy to compare notes and figure out what we can both learn.
Sure. And then one more note on that thing, and then we'll get into to what you do at SolCyber. But it's interesting because when I first went to Asia, there were a lot more expats. I should say, yeah, just expats, because companies they would typically bring somebody from the mothership out to Asia and position them there. And in the last 15, 20 years, you have so many really smart, bright, well-educated, experienced executives in Asia who are born and raised there and maybe spent time overseas getting educated, that a lot of companies have just done away with the whole expat thing. And once you're kind of on equal footing, the attractiveness for a lot of people with families and things like that, it just makes it a little bit more challenging to, say, for example, go live in Tokyo or something like that.
Yeah, 100%, right? There's a layer of burden, right? When you go do that, and in the old days, as you mentioned, I had friends that were expat assignments. Those were taken away and eased through the company machinations that they'd set up. And as you mentioned, companies don't really do that very much anymore. So it's really incumbent upon the family to sort of figure it out. And it's too bad, because I really do think it's a massive benefit. I'll be upfront. I think part of the reason why my career's gone as well as it has is because I spent a lot of time overseas, and I got to you just can't replace the learnings of dealing with different cultures, different people, different ways of doing things, different creative ideas. Like there's a level of learning and experience that comes out of that you just can't replace. So I wish the companies would get back into the model, because it's good investment. I stayed at Symantec 12 years, which is forever in the security space, because of the opportunities they gave to me.
That's awesome, and you're kind of preaching to the choir, because I totally believe that, like, the experience overseas is invaluable. But so tell me, like, how did you go from these global organizations and working with very large customers to creating a managed services provider that focuses on startups and SMEs?
Well, it's funny because for all these years in the MSSP business, whether or not it was Symantec or FireEye or otherwise, we would always bump into the mid-market. So every year when you're working on your strategies, you're saying, well, do we continue to focus on the Global 1000? Do we, is there another cohort to go, look after that we could support and provide value to? And invariably, that conversation would end up with us saying it doesn't really make sense to support the mid-market, and we would list out the reasons why. And you sort of know this, and this is a very stereotypical construct, but it's for brevity, it probably works. But the standard MSSP model is you have a very smart CIO and CISO at a large company. They have security people built into the organization, and they go through the 4,500 security products that are on the market, and they pick out all the ones that work for them, right? So they do their POCs, they test the endpoint, they test email, they test all these things, right? And after that's done, they take the data feed, they send that over to the MSSP. And then the MSSP is relatively arm's length away from the customer, and they send sort of alerts back. And sometimes the alerts are really helpful, and you can find something malicious, and a lot of times it's just sort of noise because you can't really tell what's happening. And that model quickly starts breaking down in the mid-market. The mid-market oftentimes doesn't have the staff to work through sophisticated POCs or even managing the technology. A lot of times, to get the best-in-class technology, a lot of the technology isn't sold below 2,000 user companies, because they're all focused on upper mid-market and large enterprise. A lot of times they don't have any kind of managed security service, because it's not cost effective for the MSSP to deliver services to a mid-market customer that has, let's just say, 500 employees. So there's all these challenges. And so after doing this for 20 years, I said, well, can we go solve those challenges? And if we can solve those challenges, then I think there's a market there, because the attack landscape has changed. So the mid-market is being targeted as aggressively, if not more so, than the large enterprises in today's world, because as you know very well, it's sort of threat as a service, right? So you don't have to be sophisticated to be able to attack companies anymore. You've got an entire ecosystem built up to allow relatively nominally technically people to make money through cyber attacks. And so it's very easy to target mid-market companies. And so once we sort of figured out, we think we can solve these problems in today's world, and we think the mid-market cares enough to want to solve these problems, then we thought we were onto something. We thought, okay, if we can do this well, then we start solving what I call the 4 value props, right? So you start saying, let's go to the mid-market and say, I call it certainty or removing uncertainty. Almost everybody in the mid-market say, if you're not breached today and you got breached tomorrow, what's your confidence level that you would know? And
Mm-hmm.
there are very few people in the SME space that are like 90%, 85%. Most of them are like, I don't know. I don't know if I'd know, and I don't know how long it would take to find out. And we all know that, generally speaking, the adversary is in an organization for 45 days plus, and that's because it's hard to find them. So we
Mm-hmm.
wanted to enable certainty. We wanted to make their lives easier financially, and so almost every security product you have to pay up front. And so to have a basic security program that's even what I'd say foundational, you need about 7 or 8 different pieces of tools and services. Each of those are upfront payments. There's 20K for this and 50K for that and 70K for this and 10K for this other thing. And so that model is very painful for the mid-market. It's not the way they really want to operate. They don't like upfront payments. And so we said, can we make their lives better by putting a financial package in place that's much more streamlined and sort of OpEx monthly? So can we hide that fiscal pain and structure? And then can we do that in a model that allows them to consolidate these 8 or 9 things into one single SKU? And then last, if we do that, can we make it cheaper than them having to go out and solve this problem themselves? And
Makes
and
Go
oh,
ahead.
go ahead. No, that's it.
I was going to say it makes a lot of sense, and depending on how you define SME, I mean, how small do you go?
We go down. We target about 100 to about 2,000, but we have customers that are down around 50 users.
Okay, and then if you're dealing with startups, obviously you have probably anywhere from 10 to 50, or roughly in that area there. When you say that there's like 7 or 8 tools that typically companies would have to go out and buy and then deploy, but you're going ahead, you're kind of bundling them together or bundling that service together. What are some of those key tools?
Sure. We call it the 6 components of foundation, and there's 7 or 8 tools inside of that. But the first thing you have to do is we just call it harden the organization. So that's security awareness, phishing simulation. This is something anybody can go buy, even down market. But the reality is we have a lot of customers that buy it, so they can go buy a Know Before or whatever, but they don't run it consistently because they don't have the time. So maybe once a year they'll lob a phishing simulation out, or at the last minute they'll kick off security awareness training. So it's not run in a programmatic manner. And it's definitely not using best in class, the latest, like what are the latest fishes that we all know work really well that versus the ones that were a year or two ago that everybody sort of caught on to. The second piece then is you really need advanced email protection, and everybody thinks they have it, but what most people actually have is email hygiene. So what they're doing is they're keeping out the obvious spam. What they're not in a position to do is advanced account takeover and business email compromise. And so if somebody gets username and credentials of Scott McCrady, they can log in as me and obviously emulate me, and then do all kinds of nefarious things. They can send out emails to employees to get them to click on links. They can get wire transfers, which is usually what happens. And we see a lot and a significant number of breaches with legitimate username password in the email that results in hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions, of problems in ransomware or wire transfers. So you really have to have something that's different than email hygiene. The third thing is you actually need a really proper EPP and EDR, like best in class, and this handles the malicious side of the equation. So if somebody's dropping something on your machine, you need something that is highly effective at finding and detecting that, and then allowing the SOC operators to respond to it. So the detect and respond from a malicious standpoint is needed. The other thing that's needed, which is almost always universally missed, is you need some ability to solve the threat. Again, going back to legitimate username and password. So if somebody logs in as Scott McCrady and they start moving around the network, maybe they're going to raise their privilege, escalate their privileges. How do you detect that? How do you know that Scott McCrady that's currently doing work as Scott McCrady isn't actually the real Scott McCrady? So you need some level of lateral movement detection. You need some level of user behavioral analysis, and these things are really tricky and complicated for the mid-market. And so it's not something that they tend to land on, but a significant amount of the actual, if you take the Pareto principle 80-20, a significant amount of the severe attacks start with legitimate username and password. So somebody clicked on a link, went to a website, put their username and password in. Now they've been harvested, or they got released on the dark web. So you know the models, and people just don't. They think everybody's going to click on a bad link and get a piece of malicious code a 0-day onto their machine, and that's, in today's world, that's not really as big of a threat as legitimate access. And then all that's got to be rolled into a SOC, and so. What we do is we provide that entire stack, and it's all best in breed stuff. It's literally all the stuff that we used for years at the Global 1000. If we rolled into any large bank and said this is what we're using, they're like, yep, that's all the best stuff out there. And then we package that per user per month, and so it starts at $57 per user per month, and that gets you everything. And then it goes down based on bands, and customers love it. That's your installation cost, that's your licensing, that's all your management of the platform. That's your detection, and that's your response, right? So if something bad's happening, we feel really strongly that we have a very, 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 very high chance we're going to detect it, and if we detect it, we can respond to it. And so if you're, 100 employees or 500 or 1,000, you now have a integrated, active defense program in place that has a set of people that do it for a living that really know how this stuff works, and they love it. And it also puts us closer in contact with the customer. So this arm's length relationship changes quite a bit because of the tooling that we use and how we've integrated it. It allows us to have a lot better visibility into, hey, this problem is really Scott McCrady, and it's not IP address 192.168, and we think something's going on there. Can you go investigate? Which is really what a lot of the alerts that were coming out of the systems, that I ran for years. And at the time, that was great, but in today's world, that's not sufficient. So we really try to get back to the user, the identity, and make sure that we can respond to the actual problem.
No, it makes a lot of sense. I think, most small, medium-sized businesses, and especially startups, they're so focused on their core business, they really don't have the bandwidth, or oftentimes just the desire to spend time on IT related issues and really get into especially security. I mean, everybody will say it's important,
Yep.
but when you talk to founders of startups, they'll say it's important, but really they're focused on their product or their service, and
not going out of business, right?
Exactly. And so if you've got basically, it sounds like a turnkey approach where you can have those 7 or 8, 9 different tools and things built in, and you just, hey, flip the switch and we're good to go. That sounds awesome. I like the fact that you started off with security awareness as kind of the foundational piece of that too, because that is the weakest link in everybody's basically security posture, is just having people be aware of what the potential threats are and what they should do if they see something that looks just a little off. Let me ask
Mark,
you
on
though.
that topic real quick,
Go ahead.
it's funny
Sure.
that you say that, because when we're talking to customers, they view that as, is that really that big a deal? But when I talk to security practitioners, in fact, I have this thing called Security Shorts with Scott that are like 5-minute sound bites with security practitioners. And one of the latest people came on and said people don't do their phishing simulation security awareness training well, and it just starts an entire chain link of problems inside the organization, and it's a relatively straightforward thing. And so we have companies that literally go, we can do it. It doesn't make any sense for us to do it. We don't. That's not where we want to spend our time.
Hmm.
Yep.
Well, I don't know, because I mean, we all have seen the stories of people who've just clicked on the wrong thing, or it's not even just clicking. It's like, I mean, you referenced earlier where if somebody's credentials are compromised, and then they are able to, even if the credentials aren't compromised, sometimes they just do something that says Scott McCrady, CEO, and it's just an iteration of your email address, and send an email to a new hire saying, hey, I urgently need you to do this for me. Go out and buy 50 gift cards and for this company event, and boom, the new employee goes, oh God, the CEO, I got to go.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's stuff like that, and it's funny because I have 3 boys. And they're digital natives. They have a healthy dose of skepticism or cynicism with everything that they receive via social media, email, or whatever. But I think there's a lot of people out in the workforce that didn't grow up, under
That's right.
the whole idea of cybersecurity. It's something that, when I was growing up, there was no such thing, right?
Right.
Nothing, not in the public domain anyway. So the education piece is critical, and people need to know too, like, number one question, if you have something that you're not sure about, who do you go to?
Hmm.
I mean, where do you raise your hand? And if you're in a startup or you're an SME, you're a small manufacturing company, you get this email and you're like, okay, what should I do with this? Well, you should definitely do something. There should be kind of a process, right?
Mark, you're right on the nose there because we talk about people, process, and technology all the time, and candidly, when we're talking with customers, usually it's the integration of all the technologies that they like. Um,
Hmm.
but the savvy folks know that it's the process as much as all of those pieces that make it all run properly. And so we talk to people all the time saying, yeah, we have really amazing capabilities to detect harvested credentials. That being said, if you get something funny, you always pick up the phone and call the person. It doesn't matter. And you can imagine in our company, we get all kinds of people throwing stuff at us. And the team knows, and we train the team that, you get on the phone, you call Scott, right? If you're
Right.
seeing, and it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter if you're an intern or a BDR or whatever, right? Nothing happens when you get urgent requests from executives.
Totally agree. Hey, but back to actually on this kind of the same line there. When your customer, so you're providing these services and you do detect some kind of anomalous behavior or some kind of strange activity, and then you relay that information to them. Walk me through that process in terms of, do you advise them on here are the next things that you should be doing? I mean, how does that conversation play out?
Yeah, I love this question because it really goes to why our customers love us is that so the old model was something like we would just shoot you an email, right, or alert in the portal and say we think this is what's going on, but it was always hard to really tell. Uh, in our model, we have way more fidelity, and so think of it as different types of incidents. So let's just say that uh, there's a malicious piece of code that actually gets dropped onto somebody's machine for some reason, and we're going to detect that. Depending on what that is, we'll respond to it. If we can put the process back, that if we see the process has been changed, we can put it back. We can remove the piece of malicious code. We'll do it. We'll just so most of our customers give us permission to go do that. Some customers say no, contact us first, then do it. But we will actually do the work of solving the problem as a step one. Now there's certain things that we technically can't do. So let's just say, let's go back to the harvested credentials example. So based on the user behavioral analysis and the customer, tripping some tripwires, we now know with pretty good confidence that Scott McCrady's been compromised, right?
Hmm.
So we don't have access to their username and password, their domain. We get data off their domain controllers. So we do the identity correlation, but we wouldn't obviously be able to change their username and password. So in that particular case, we call the customer and say, hey, it looks very likely this is the case. Check your MFA, see why it's not working, and also obviously change Scott's username and password. Um, and so then the third thing, so so we always try to validate. And the third thing then is we do what you're familiar with the term hunting, but a lot of customers may not be. Is things come out all the time, and last year had more 0 days than the previous 3 years combined. So when new stuff happens, right, log4j or whatever, we have the ability to go back and hunt. So we hunt through logs, generally speaking, about weekly, looking for things that have changed. Is there a diff in processes that just hasn't been seen, right? For this process, we know processes shouldn't change, and if there's a different processes, um, and then we can do what's needed there. So we can come back and say, listen, we're going to quarantine that machine for you right now. That needs to be rolled back. The ability to really get into the where at all possible into specifics and actually solve the problem is a real big differentiator, and the customers love it. So there's a lot less what we call alert fatigue and just sort of alerts coming across the fence, and a lot more. And this goes back also to the philosophy, Mark, of getting to user, right? So there's
Hmm.
there's just a lot more, like, we can see where the problem is with the person and their machine and their identity versus, again, rotating IP addresses, which is what you used to see before. And so that gives us the ability to solve problems at root versus what you see in a traditional MSSP model.
Makes a lot of sense. Hey, What about customers? I mean, pretty much everybody these days is on Office 365, right? And
Yep.
or now it's M365. There are a lot of security controls and data protection tools that are kind of baked into that platform.
Hmm.
And I'm sure that most of your customers say, "Hey, well, they have a O365. Maybe they don't have the expertise to kind of optimize the security settings." Do you work with them to help them do that?
Yeah. So it's funny you ask. We actually have this thing in the portal that's called "If You Have 5 minutes."
Okay.
So in their portal, they have that. And so, first of all, agreed with you. Probably 80% of our customers are some version of M365, and candidly, they do a great job. The telemetry we get off of Azure AD and the components there is fantastic, and it really allows us to track the identity and correlate that back into the tools that we use. But whatever. Let's just say they haven't turned MFA on or something like that, right? Which
Hmm.
is not uncommon and obviously needs to be done. Um, we actually completely recommend a variety of things. And again, we put it in so we have quarterly review calls with every customer, and they get a
Hmm.
monthly report. And so we put all those things there, and then we drop it into the portal of "If You Have 5 minutes." And so there's a variety of things that we'll know that are best practices, and we'll work with the customers to get those turned on. And so some of the things um, we can do, some of the things they need to do, but we can sort of tell them how to do it. And some of them are, if it's really complicated, they need somebody to go on site. We'll work with somebody to get on site. So a lot of them will have an MSP they work with, or we've got people that we work with that if they need somebody like hands-on keyboard to go, turn a screw, right? We can
Hmm.
we can help them with that. But yes, to your point, we really do try to. We call it, how do you provide value in peacetime? Because the whole theory is that every day somebody's trying to break into XYZ company and we're just like fighting them tooth and nail. And as that's not really the way it works. It's really more that stuff happens sort of in bursts. We see companies get sort of probed and attacked in cycles. And between those, what you're trying to do is continue to up level their posture, right? So why is your
Hmm.
phishing simulation score going down, right? Why did you have 85% people doing well, 90%, 95%, and then it turned around and went down to 75%? Um, you know, you just bought E5, right? These are some of the things you can turn on there to really, increase your security, things like that.
Awesome. I love that. Providing value in peacetime. I'm gonna steal that from you. All right.
Feel
That's
free, feel free.
that's pretty cool. Hey, what about mobile device management? I mean, do you help out in that area at all?
No, we don't really, and the reason is MDM has changed a lot over the last 3 or 4 years. And what we've seen, especially in the mid-market, is that companies don't really want to manage the mobile devices. I think in the large enterprise, maybe you're still seeing that trend, but um, I can't think of a company I've talked to in the last year and a half that has been like, I've got 200 employees, I'm going to send them phones, or they all said they're going to bring their personal device. And as soon as you say that, the company's like, I don't want to manage those personal devices.
Okay,
Yeah.
makes sense. I've seen other situations where, whether it's a personal device or company device, the company wants some control over the company data, even if it's a personal device. And some of the MDM solutions allow for that. But again, I haven't seen that in the managed service space, which is why I was asking.
Mhm.
To walk me through a typical business conversation when you go in and talk to one of your prospective customers, what are their biggest concerns?
So it depends on the company. So there's probably three overarching sort of prospects out there. The first one is they have a thing that's a problem. It could be compliance, right? It could be, hey, we're a fintech startup, right? And we got to do something for the government. We're a healthcare startup. We got HIPAA. So the first one is they've got a thing that they need to go solve, and they know that security is going to do it. But another thing that they need to go solve is cyber insurance. So Mark, one of the things we did, it took us about a year, but because we're so outcome driven, so imagine if you're a company and you've gone and had to buy all these 8 things and theoretically stitch them together, and then go buy your MSSP. So you do it all, you build it all yourself, right? Um, the the insurance companies will give you a little bit of discount, but you sort of have to prove it, and they're not going to
Hmm.
give you that much discount. And the process is incredibly painful to do that. And your premium spike is still going to go up. We went to the insurance industry and we said, um, we're providing world-class, best-in-class, nation-state grade security to the mid-market. You should reward them for doing that. And the insurance industry at first was a little skeptical, but once they got into it, they were like, we love this because now we have a third party that is providing a consistent set of solutions that we know are highly effective. And so we don't sell cyber insurance, but any of our customers who use our foundational coverage are pre-approved. So if you've been breached, we've got customers that have been breached that have come to us. They can't get cyber insurance, they can with us. So you're pre-approved. You have an expedited application, so the 500 questions is skinny down to 30. You get a 30% discount. You get a 10% rebate. And so and you can use your own broker. So their broker goes to the plan administrator. Plan administrator contacts us, asks if they actually purchased the service. We say yes, and then they get their quote. And so we're really trying to make like the CIO and the CISOs or the head of IT's life way easier by building this sinew between the security program, because they're in the middle of all this, and these other compelling events that happen, these other quote unquote things, whether or not it's cyber insurance or compliance or something like that. And so to answer your first one, the first prospect tends to have a driving need, and they'll find us. So let me. Does that make sense? By the way, because there's two others, but let me pause.
Well, totally. And the insurance, the cyber insurance thing is becoming increasingly important from what I see. And also, you're right, or I can agree with you that a lot of insurance companies are providing more substantial discounts based upon, what you've invested in your security posture and what you can kind of prove. And if you can outsource that proof to an MSSP, then great.
Yep. And so that piece goes really well. The second one is what I just called the good security person, right? They were recently hired, or they know that they don't know if something bad's happening, right? They don't have the tools, the people, the processes. That's never going to happen. Maybe they've got one or two tools. They're trying to manage it as best they can. So we get a lot of those people, which is just like, we know we're not where we need to be. We need to be better. We're never going to get there on our own. So we love your model. So that's the second type of person. And then the third type of person, and we just had this conversation, which is the savvy buyer, right? Security savvy, super savvy, really understands what it takes to have good security practice, may have actually quite a few pieces themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And what they're saying is, I can continue to, pick your tool, your best in class tool. I can continue down this path, but it's expensive. It's upfront payments. There's no vendor consolidation. And it makes a lot more sense to save the money, pay monthly, and make sure that this thing's hung together really, really well, versus me trying to make sure it's hung together. So instead of our 8 things, maybe they have 5 things, but Bob or Susie are over there trying to make sure it's all working together, and it's difficult, and they sort of know it. So the third person is what I'd call the very savvy security buyer. And you see this a lot at like what I'd call the Series A or Series B level startup. So maybe they have 100 people. They're like, we got to do better on security. We're becoming a target. We're too well known. Maybe we're going to be acquired. And they're like, and they're very technically savvy, so they get it. They just don't want to do it.
Yeah, I see that a lot. When you're talking with your customers, what kind of process do you have to help them kind of understand what their current spend is? Because I mean, if you're going to take something from what we're currently doing and we're going to outsource it, you have to do some kind of cost benefit analysis. Do you have some kind of process or tool to help them with that?
We do, and there's basically 2 models. So we've all purchased this stuff at some point in time in the past. So we literally went through all the contracts that we've had, and we pulled out our pricing. And so we have what we call street pricing, real street pricing, for the different tools. And so we'll be like, if you're 500 seats and you have an endpoint, you're probably paying around this. And we are usually within we're usually really close to what they're paying for the underlying tool. And that's the first way. But we have some customers that will just literally say, we're happy to build a model for you, and we'll do a zero cost or a cost reduction, because usually by the time, if they have a lot of the tools, it's usually much more cost effective to go with us. And so we'll just build a model. So we have obviously a template that we use that says, okay, let's just plug in when your contracts are due, how much you're paying, blah blah blah. We'll run the math and come back to you. And then we can also do a cyber insurance quote as well, and just do an apples to apples comparison.
Yeah, it's awesome. I think another benefit to working with a managed services provider is just when you talk about these different tools, finding the subject matter experts in today's labor market can be very challenging. Is that something that comes up?
Yes, it is. So especially in the mid market, most of the companies, we talk to a company that's 500 employees, they have one senior guy and another guy for arms and legs, right? And so two people supporting 500 employees, IT, security, servers, the product, right? All of it. They're like, they're like, it doesn't make sense to hire someone. And by the way, as you know, in the current market with the cost of people, just hiring one person is a very expensive endeavor. And
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
most of the people are really wanting to get the people focused on the product. Unless that, I said, does anybody want to wake up in the morning and go try to look at alerts in some sort of system they got somewhere? No, and nobody says yes.
Absolutely. Hey, what can you tell us about SolCyber in terms of where you're at with the growth of the business, geographies, customers, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so business has been really good. Obviously, the economic situation is getting a little more dicey out there, but so far for us, we haven't seen a significant impact. We're pretty new, Mark. So we've launched out of stealth a little bit over a year and 3 months ago or so. We've been growing double digits every quarter. So growth has been very, very solid. Our customers range anywhere from 50 users. Most of our customers are probably above that in the 100 user range, and then they go up from there. We've got lots of conversations going with customers in the 2,000 range, 5,000 seat range, but we really try to target under 2,000 seats. Is really where we try to target.
And how are you
Okay.
finding your customers? Are they reaching out to you online, or you have an outbound sales team? How's that working?
Man, great question. So it's weird, and it probably won't stay this way, but we are almost a third, a third, a third. And so a third of our revenues come from inbound leads, website contacts, contact us. A third of our revenue has come from partners that have found us deals. They're like, man, we love you, and we know a company that needs what you have. And then a third is through outbound. And so right now, and will that stay at that mix, which is a really nice mix for us? I'm not sure. We're going to try to put a little bit more focus on the partnerships this upcoming year. So we'd like to see that number go up. But so far, that's where it's a relatively consistent split amongst the three channels.
Awesome. And you mentioned the economic situation. Sometimes during a recession, it can be an opportunity for managed service providers, because companies are looking to say, hey, let's focus on our core business and spin off anything that's kind of on the periphery to somebody that is a specialist and can probably do it in a more affordable way. Are you seeing any of that at all?
Not yet. I have seen that in the past. So this is my third one, I guess, 2000, 2008, and now. Each one's different. But you do see companies take a more pragmatic view of what they're trying to accomplish. So usually what I see is the conversation switches from, we really, really, really need good security to, yeah, we do, but can you save us money?
Right.
And so the dollars and cents and really putting pen to paper goes up during these types of models, and if you can, or during these types of situations. But if you can get your models right, then I believe you can continue to have success, which is obviously what we're trying to do. We're trying to make the life easy for the CIO and the CISO, and we're trying to make this. We call it all the time. We say we're trying to make this as no-brainer. Because we're all security geeks, and so we're just trying to make, obviously we want to build our company and all that, but if we can get this into everybody's hands in a way that's like, it doesn't even make sense to say no to this, then we're sort of doing our job well.
Yeah, in your role as CEO, I mean, obviously you're very much focused on the profitability of the business and growing the business, but a part of that is making sure that you have the right kind of service mix. How do you kind of what's the process for updating your service mix, or is it pretty much set right now?
Well, it's funny. It's not. So our core products are foundational coverage, and that's what we talked about. We have these items called extended coverages. So foundational coverage is basically any company out there. You got to be able to protect a user no matter where they go, right? So just consider that, we call table stakes or foundational. But we have a lot of companies that are in the startup space. So we have extended options that customers can buy. Maybe their product is a really heavy cloud product. So the ability to do really sophisticated security in the cloud are things that we sell as add-ons. That being said, foundational coverage itself, we update about every 6 months. So the last update, we added in some really sophisticated user behavioral analysis because we didn't think that what we were doing was quite good enough if somebody sophisticated was getting into the organization. And we added in the ability, we were starting to see more and more companies want us to take in and say, hey, Scott, can you take in these couple firewalls? So we added in EPS, a small 10 EPS into the bucket. So that, and if you're foundational coverage, you now get that. You can take advantage of that, no additional cost. Our next round of roadmap items is we're going to launch a practical vulnerability management service. So again, everybody is trying to figure out how to solve that in an elegant manner. That will be included. We're also most likely.
Can you just talk a little bit about when you say practical vulnerability management? How do you define that?
The easiest or the simplest way, we can get into a ton of details, but I think you'll get it, is you're saying, is there a vulnerability? Is there an exploit? And do you have the thing in across those two things? Do you have something in your infrastructure that turns this thing from a theoretical into a bullseye? So we know that, 90% of vulnerabilities, notifications just sort of sit there because people don't want to patch them because they're not deemed sufficiently scary enough. What we're trying to do is bubble up the stuff that really matters and make sure that stuff gets cleaned up.
Excellent. Yeah, no, I think that's something that, very much needed.
Mm-hmm. And so that's coming. And then we're trying to figure out how to get better network telemetry off the laptops so that we can actually cross-correlate back to we have some really nice threat intel. So if new command controls, new DNSs, domain names are being stood up, how do we qualify that back to the actual underlying user? So back in the day, obviously, when everybody's in a headquarters or an office, you could do that through their networking gear. But if you have 300 employees and every one of them works from the house, if something slips through the cracks and maybe it doesn't get picked up by one of the tools, which can happen, right? Somebody once told me, sorry, I'll take it back. Not someone. So on my board is General Keith Alexander, who started U.S. Cyber Command. And I asked him once, I said, what is the U.S.'s success rate at getting into another organization? He said 100%. So we know that there's ways of getting in around these tools. What we're trying to say is, can we detect if something like that were to happen, if there's ways of getting in? So we're trying to figure out how to get better network telemetry off the laptops that people have so that we can have another layer of visibility in case something gets in that candidly we don't know about, which we work in the security space. That's the job of the adversaries to figure that stuff out. So those are that will be on our next release. And again, it's included in the price. So we've got 2 or 3 customers that are already like, yeah, we better try and figure out what to do about this problem, and you guys are having it, so we'll beta test it and go with it.
Well, yeah, that's the other value you bring to the table is, I mean, you're thinking security 24/7, and how can we kind of evolve your offering to fit what the market needs. Whereas, most SMEs and startups, they're focused again on their core product or offering, and how do they just don't have the resources to keep up with the current threat landscape or the evolution of different tools in the market to know what's the best fit for them. So I mean, I just see a huge amount of value. Go ahead.
Yeah, somebody coined it. They said somebody told us, they're like, you guys are sort of like the Netflix for security. Like if you go from Blu-ray to high def and high def to 4K, and there's new movies being released, like it's Netflix's job or your favorite streaming service, whatever, to go get all that stuff, upgrade all the infrastructure, make the changes, add the elasticity. And me as a customer, I just pay my $9.99, right?
Yeah.
And in a way, we're trying to do that.
Excellent. Well, hey, Scott, enjoy this conversation. Any last thoughts or things that you'd like to share with the audience?
Well, first of all, we're always hiring, even in today's world. So, and I tell this to everyone, is it's such a great industry. So if you got dads, mothers, nieces, nephews, aunts, uncles, security is a great place to build a career. It's fun, it's exciting. You don't have to be a massive technician. There's sales roles, marketing roles, where you need to know a little bit, but you don't have to be the hacker in the basement. So I always give that plug, that just come one, come all. We really need more people in the industry. Two, obviously, Scott at SolCyber. If you have questions, solcyber.com. And three, we're everybody's sort of in this together. So keep us in the loop. We follow everybody on LinkedIn, but if there's people out there that see new and emerging threats or new ways to solve problems, we're all ears, and we're always trying to figure out how do we make sure our customers are secured, and if they're secured, then how do we leverage that into their other pain points in their life, like compliance or cyber insurance, to make that easier.
Awesome. Well, hey, Scott, like I said, great conversation, and I wish you and the rest of the SolCyber team an amazing 2023.
Awesome, Mark. Thank you very much for the time. Appreciate it.
Hello, welcome to Secure Talk, your trusted source of information on the latest threats, trends, tools, and technology related to cybersecurity and compliance.